I want to share with you this chapter, Psalms 27, which we read in the Torah. We read it in the synagogue throughout from Rosh Hashanah, from Rosh Chodesh Elul, for 50 days, all the way to the end of Sukkot. Every single day, twice a day. I'm going to read the Hebrew. We're not going to skip the Hebrew. The Hebrew, we're going to remind you all that when you go into internet and you see the different translations they have for the Tanakh, don't forget that there's only one original language that the Tanakh was written in, and that's Hebrew. So we're going to read it in Hebrew, we're going to read it in English, and then we're going to try to understand why do we read this, why do we recite this psalm, and what is the concept of this psalm. Psalm 27, you have here in Hebrew and in English. LeDavid, Adonai ori v'yish'i mimi ira. Adonai ma'oz chayai mimi efchad. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? Bikrov alai mereim le'cholet besari. When the wicked drew around me to consume my flesh, tzarai v'oivayli, my enemies and my foes, hema kashlu v'nafal, they stumbled and fell. Im tachaneh alai machaneh lo yira libi. Even if an army should encamp against me, my heart would not fear. Im takum alai milchama, bezot ani botech. If a war would rise up against me, even then I would be confident. Here you see you're missing a translation. Dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life. Lachazot b'noam Adonai, to behold the pleasantness of the Lord. Ulevaker beichal, and to visit His temple. Levaker, we say it translates to visit. In the original Tanakh, levaker doesn't really mean to visit. It means to really inspect and to make sure everything's going okay. Ki yitzpeneini b'sukkah, b'yom ra'ah yastireni. For He shall hide me in His sukkah in the day of evil. He shall hide me in the recess of His tent. B'tzur yiremeni. He shall set me up upon a rock. Ve'ata, and now my head will be lifted up above my enemies around me. Yerum roshi alo yivai svivotai. Ve'ezbecha be'ohalo zivchei tru'ah shira v'azamra l'Adonai. And I will bring, and I therefore shall offer in His temple sacrifices of joy. I shall sing and give praise to the Lord. Shema Adonai kol yikra, v'choneini v'aneni. Hear, O Lord, my voice as I cry. Al tat be'af avdecha, do not hide your face from me. Do not put your servant away in anger. Ezrati hayita, you have been my help. Al ticheni, al ta'azveini Elohei yishii. Do not abandon me forsake me, O God, of my salvation. Ki avivi mi azavuni, my father and my mother have forsaken me. V'Adonai yasfeni, let the Lord then gather me. Horeni Adonai derkecha, teach me your way, O Lord. Unecheni be'orach mishor, and lead me on a straight path. Leman shorerai, because of my enemies. Al titneni benefesh tzarai, do not deliver me over the will of my enemies. Ki kamu bi'edei sheker, for false witnesses have risen against me. V'ifeach Hamas, who breathes violence. Ulehamanti derot betuvat, and I had not believed that I would see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living, Eretz Chaim. Kavel Adonai chazak v'yametz libecha v'kavel Adonai. Have hope in the Lord, be strong, and He shall give courage to your heart, and have hope in the Lord. So, I think that most of the words here in this psalm are quite clear, quite understandable. But the question is, what kind of psalm is this? We have psalms of prayer, of begging to God. We have psalms of expressing faith. What kind of psalm do we have here? Well, when we begin, we see that the psalmist is expressing his confidence in God. You are my light, you're my salvation. Whom shall I fear? Everything's fine, nothing to fear. The Lord has the stronghold of my life. Everything's great. I'm totally protected. Nothing can bother me. Nothing can come against me. Bezot ani boteach. I'm totally confident in the fact, in my confidence in God, in the fact that God is with me. I'm totally there. God, nothing can happen to me. Nothing can happen to me. That's what he says again and again. Even if there's a war against me, nothing can happen to me. One thing I asked of God, to sit in the house of God and to be there and visit his heichal, his sanctuary. One thing he's asking. You know, when you read what it says here, one thing I'm asking, I want to sit in the house of God. I want to see, one thing he asks, that's what I seek. I shall dwell in the house of the Lord all days of my life. Behold the pleasantness of the Lord. Visit the temple. He shall hide me in his sukkah. He shall hide me in his recess of tent. He shall set me upon a rock. It sounds like there's not one thing. There are more than one thing. There are quite a few things he's asking for. What's one thing? There's an interesting words of our scholars who say that God said to David, you're asking, he said, you're only asking one thing, and you're asking a whole list of things. So David answers God and says, I learned from you. You know, in Deuteronomy chapter 10, verse 12, God says, and you now Israel, what is God asking from you? Only to fear him, and to go in his ways, and to love him, and to worship with your entire heart and soul, and to preserve his commandments, and everything I'm telling you to do today, so that it should be good for you. So God says, well, I learned from you. You all said, all I'm asking you is this, and you have a whole list. And in the Deuteronomy, it's quite understandable that the concept is that God says, first of all, you know, when we are parents, also it happens times when children and parents have different expectations. You know, what's the big deal? You go take your credit card and pass it in the store. What's the big deal? We have different expectations. There was once a kid who his father said, I'm going to send you to school, and don't worry, I'll pay all your expenses. Everything will be okay. And the kid gets there and he writes back home, Father, I'm okay. I'm sitting and studying, and it's fine. Can you please send me 1,000 rubles? And the father opens the envelope and puts 100 rubles in the envelope. And he writes back to them, I'm so happy you're studying and I'm so happy you're learning, but I hope you learn that the word 100 you write with 2 zeros. And not 3 zeros. Anyway, but sometimes we have problems with expectations. But I think here, in the book of Deuteronomy, God says, everything I'm asking from you is for your good. Here, what David is saying, I want to be and I want to sit in the house of God and feel close to you. I want to feel that closeness. And it means I want you to be there for me, so I can see your beauty and see your favor and be in your sanctuary. And at the same time, I want you to hide me in days when things are not as good. And I want you to, but he says, I'm sure you're going to do that. And therefore, he concludes, I'm going to bring an offering and celebrate to God. Suddenly, everything changes. Suddenly, there's a totally new different atmosphere. Suddenly, what happened? A few seconds ago, he was saying, everything's great, I have confidence in you, everything is so wonderful, and nobody can beat me, I'm going to defeat anybody who comes upon me. Suddenly, Shema Adonai, verse 7, hear, O Lord, my voice, I cry out, be gracious to me, answer me, my heart is said, seek my face. Please, I need you. My father and mother have forsaken me. By the way, we mentioned before, orphan. When King David wants to express the idea of being totally neglected, what does he say? My father and mother have neglected me. But what do we see here? A totally different, almost I would say we have two different Psalms here. Verse 1 to 6, everything's great, nothing to fear. If you turn the page around, you'll see I divided it in that way. Exactly. The first side, you'll see everything's fine. The Lord's my salvation. When wicked drew around me to consume me, they stumbled and fell. Even if an army should encamp against me, everything is really great. Totally confident. Suddenly, here, oh Lord, I'm crying, and he's crying and expressing. Obviously, we see here a distinction between two halves of this chapter, but the two halves express, I would say, a fundamental difference between a religious aspect. It would be like the first half expresses really a position of absolute faith in God, without any doubt, and of course he's aware there are enemies, there are foes, there are people who hate him, but he knows that there even may be a possibility of war against him. But none of this undermines him in any way, because he knows he's gonna bring the victory. Suddenly, in the second half, we see a totally different story.